everyone. Welcome back to the Association Pod. The regular season is over, and we are now entering playoff time. We got lots to analyze in the championship bracket and the consolation bracket. Some hotly contested matchups are on the plate for us and for the league to watch. We're going to break down some of the key players for each teams in the matchups and who is the X factor that teams will rely on the most to have a great impact and help them move on to the next round. Everybody strap in. We got a lot to cover in today's episode. It's going to be a good one. As we saw the season come to a close and we look to the postseason, we had no changes with the 4 teams having first round buys in the championship bracket and consolation bracket. Aspirations of a title was able to hold on to the first seed of the championship bracket, with Wiggins of Nas staying in that second seed as well. On the consolation side, we had Harry the Hawk and Benny the Bistro holding on to their first round buys as well, with them staying 7th and 8th respectively as they were coming into the week. For aspirations of a title, it's been no surprise that they've been near the top of the standings all year with the amount of talent that they've collected over the draft and the course of the season. Over the last 2 weeks, Tim has had Victor Wembanyama and Cade Cunningham playing as top 5 players in the player rankings, with Victor being 2nd and Cade being 4th. You throw in a healthy LaMelo Ball being ranked 7 in the player rankings, and the return of Giannis Antetokounmpo expected to be happening tonight. Tim is hoping that all of his star players continue to play at the high level they've been producing at and give him a great run and a chance of winning the title. As for our number 2 seed in the championship bracket, Nate has performed excellently and shown some great acquisitions and some talent on his roster. Tyrese Maxey has been playing as a top 3 fantasy player in the Yahoo player rankings, and Luka resides in the top 10 over the last 2 weeks as well. Some of the X factors for Nate moving forward is going to be the health of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, being able to overcome some of these nagging injuries he's had over the last couple of weeks. If SGA can stay healthy and he continues to get great production out of Derek White, who's ranked 11th over the last 2 weeks, we could see Nate making a run at toppling the number 1 seed in the championship bracket. Looking at the consolation bracket bye week teams, there's a little bit more questions around the number 1 seed of the consolation bracket with Harry the Hawk. Kenny has got a couple of players playing through injuries that have missed a couple of games lately. One player being his recently acquired James Harden. James has missed a couple of games with rest and a nagging thumb injury. However, he was able to play through this injury last night and put up 36 minutes of playtime. If James can continue to play through this injury and be a productive player for Kenny, we could see Harry the Hawk making a nice run in the consolation bracket for best lottery odds next season. Some nice production out of players like Emmanuel Quickley and some surprise good numbers out of Chris Middleton on his new team in Dallas could help give some good support in case James Harden does miss some extended time. If Harden does miss time, Kenny is definitely going to hope that G.G. Jackson of the Memphis Grizzlies continues the score at his high output. As over the last 2 weeks, he's scored over 100 points and has been putting up a lot of numbers in other categories as well, with the Memphis Grizzlies relying on their younger players and their little mini tank as the season ends. As we look at the other top seed in the consolation bracket, there are less injury questions around Benny Bistro, minus one Kristaps Porzingis, who after playing his 1 game debuting for Golden State, has yet to suit up again since then. However, Benny is getting some nice production out of a couple of players, including some players on tanking teams like we looked at for Kenny's squad. Javon Small from Memphis has been ranked 20th over the last 2 weeks in the Yahoo player rankings and is putting up some great numbers that Benny's been able to take advantage of over the last couple of games. The investment in Cason Wallace has finally proven his worth as he's ranked 26th over the last 2 weeks for the Bistro. Benny also made a nice acquisition of getting Nick Clifford from the Sacramento Kings. Clifford put up 26 points last night in LA and has scored double digits in 4 straight games. The scoring output and Clifford's defensive effort, having 15 steals over the last 2 weeks, is giving Benny a great shot at making a run for the consolation title as well. Now that we've taken a look at our teams with bye weeks for the first round of the playoffs, let's take a moment to highlight a couple of the matchups and the key things to look at for the first round matchups. Our first matchup is going to be Jordan and Kat. going up against Chris and a big lump with Knobs. Both teams are coming off winning weeks, with Kat beating Benny 5-4 and Chris being able to take down the Infirmary with an impressive mark of 6-3. With both of these teams heading in the right direction, it's sure to make this matchup one to watch in the consolation bracket. For Jordan and Kat, a couple of the key players that have been showing out well and will need to continue to do so is his twin towers of Alperen Sengun and Jalen Duren. The two big men have played very well over the last 2 weeks as they rank 22nd and 23rd in the Yahoo player rankings. Duren brings impressive field goal percentage and great point scoring and rebounding to the team, while Sengun brings a little bit of everything with his scoring, rebounding, and playmaking with assists. The two players staying healthy and producing well over this next week is definitely the X factor that Cat will need to move on to the next round. Player that might be the most important under the radar for Cat to play well and move on is Drew Holiday. Holiday has scored more than 20 points in 3 of the last 4 outings for Portland. And with Denny Avdia continuing to sit out with injury, there's plenty of opportunities for Holiday to score, play make, and have a nice impact on the squad. He's only ranked 129 in Yahoo's player rankings. However, most of that is due to a high number of turnovers. However, Holiday's impact and all the other stat categories are what make him an under the radar factor for Cat. He's knocked down 12 threes, scored 105 points, and had outputs over 20 in both rebounds and assists. If he can continue to do so, we might look back on next Sunday and find Drew Holiday being a great impact in Cat moving forward. On the other side of this matchup, Chris has come in guns blazing, being able to take down the previously ranked 3 seed in the standings. He's had a couple of players who are performing excellent over the last 2 weeks. 2 guards in particular playing very well are Kevin Porter Jr. and Reed Shepherd. Both of these players rank in the top 15 of Yahoo's player rankings, with Porter being 5th and Reed Shepherd being 13th. Porter specifically has had a great impact on the defensive end with 14 steals over the last 2 weeks. Reed Shepherd has been lights out from the three-point line as he's made 24 three-pointers in that same time frame as well. Looking at the team and the player, though, that could have the highest impact for Chris moving on to the next round of the playoffs is probably going to be Dyson Daniels. Dyson, over the last 2 weeks, has 57 points, 42 rebounds, and 38 assists, and also grabbed 16 steals over the last 2 weeks. He fills so many different stat categories for Chris and makes so many contributions that help the team succeed over the last couple of weeks. Chris is going to need this kind of output from Dyson Daniels and maybe even a little bit more if he's to make a Cinderella run out of the 12 seed and knock down the 9 seed in the consolation bracket. Moving on to our next matchup in the consolation bracket, we have Captain's Carnival that jumped up into the 10th seed, taking on the underdogs in the 11th spot. Taylor's team is coming in after a great performance against Harry the Hawk, where they won that matchup 6-3 in week 18. One of the most surprising acquisitions for Taylor, and a player that has been performing well over the last couple of months, is Julian Champagny. Champagny ranks 16th in Yahoo's player rankings over the last 2 weeks and continues to be lights out from the three-point line. Taylor also has Devin Vassell performing very well alongside his San Antonio teammate on Captain's Carnival. The two players combined for 41 three-pointers over the last 2 weeks and scored 183 points as well. The X factor, though, for Captain's Carnival, in my opinion, is none other than one of his star players on the roster, Jamal Murray. Jamal has had arguably the best season of his career with scoring, field goal percentage, and playmaking as well. He's been able to take advantage of a few moments that Nikola Jokic has sat out a couple of games and been able to really hone in on his scoring and assists. Jamal has an opportunity to face a couple of teams that aren't quite so strong on the defensive end over this week. Denver faces Utah, the Lakers, and the Knicks. All 3 teams that have a little bit of wariness in defending point guards and have given up some nice outputs to opposing guards in this season. It's a favorable matchup for Jamal Murray over this week and something that Captain's Carnival is going to need to have out of Murray to move on to the next round. As for Ryan S. and the underdogs, there is a couple of injury concerns that are going to give Ryan some worry as we face the first week of the playoffs. Cooper Flagg has missed multiple games over the last few weeks as he is dealing with a foot injury that has kept him out since February 10th. In that time, we've seen the underdogs have a couple of matchups that haven't landed so favorably, including last week where they lost 2-7 to the top seed in the league, aspirations of a title. There still are players on this roster performing exceptionally well compared to the standards that you come to expect. Jaden McDaniels has been a top 40 player all season and continues to produce well over the last couple of weeks. A couple of surprising acquisitions that Ryan has been able to make and are key players in this matchup are Gui Santos and Maxime Reynaud. Reynaud ranks 36th in the player rankings, and Santos ranks 24th. Both of these players are getting lots of playtime on some injured rosters, with Reynaud filling the center role for Sabonis, and Santos having more playing time due to the injury to Jimmy Butler. With these great performances, there's probably not a bigger X factor for the underdogs than Isaiah Joe. Joe has taken advantage of a couple of Thunder players missing games in the last couple weeks and has showed out with his three-point making and point scoring. He's made 21 three-pointers and scored 81 points over the last 2 weeks. Joe has also had a great impact on the defensive end, snagging 12 steals. This helped him be in the top 30 of the player rankings over the last 2 weeks and is going to be the biggest X factor for the underdogs to move past this first round of the playoffs if Cooper Flagg isn't able to return anytime soon. It's going to be a couple of great matchups in the consolation bracket, with the teams obviously still having a lot on the line to play for, with best lottery odds in the next draft on the line. I can't wait to see how the matchups shake out and what we'll have at the end of the week. Now, we turn our attention to the championship bracket, and we look at our first matchup on that side with the Jimmy Chitwoods, who moved up into the 3 seed, going against the Heatles and the 6 seed. On the Jimmy Chitwood side, they are a team that has dealt with a lot of injuries and a lot of adversity, considering they had no draft picks in the first 3 rounds last offseason. However, the team has made some great picks and some great acquisitions that have helped them make a surprise run into one of the top 3 seeds of the playoffs. The 2 most impactful players from that draft are 2 14th round picks and 2 rookies, Con Knipple and VJ Edgecombe. These 2 players are ranked in the top 20 in the Yahoo player rankings over the last 2 weeks, with Con being 10th and VJ being 18th. Both players have knocked down more than 15 threes and scored more than 120 points. They also have identical numbers in assists and steals, with both players having 15 and 9 in those categories, respectively. The surprise has been how well these rookies have been able to score the ball efficiently, with Khan being 52.8% and VJ being 47.9 over the last 2 weeks. My team is going to need these 2 rookies to continue to produce at high outcomes over this week to continue this miraculous season for the Jimmy Chitwoods. They're definitely going to need to stand out, as we just saw today that Jaylen Brown is going to miss his game tonight with an illness. The Jimmy Chitwoods recently acquired Jaylen Brown at the deadline, and he's made a nice impact in helping them make a run to move up to the 3 seed in the playoffs. However, this illness is going to knock him out on the second night of a back-to-back and prevent him from contributing tonight for the matchup. Jaylen Brown is going to be the X factor for the Jimmy Chitwoods, as even though he's missing a game tonight, the Celtics still have 3 games in the week for Jaylen Brown to hopefully come back and produce well for the team. On the other side of the bracket, the Heatles and John Frank are getting a player back off the injury list healthy to make a run and shock the world out of the 6th seed of the playoffs. It's been reported that Darius Garland has healed up enough from his toe injury to finally make his Clippers debut tonight against Golden State. Garland on the season has been averaging 18 points and 7 assists in about 30 minutes of playtime. It'll be interesting to see if Garland has any sort of minutes restriction, and if so, how that affects his production for John Frank. Nonetheless, it's a key impact to get back on the roster as the playoff times roll in today. The X factor for John Frank is none other, though, than Karl Anthony Towns. The star big man has been playing very well since All-Star break, and over the last 2 weeks, he's the 14th best player in Yahoo's rankings. He's knocked down 11 threes, scored 117 points, and been rebounding the ball excellently, as he's grabbed 63 rebounds over the last 2 weeks. John Frank is going to need Towns to play well alongside his Knicks teammate Jalen Brunson that the Heatles also have on the roster. If Towns can produce at the level he has over the last 2 weeks, there is definitely a shot for the Heatles to make the upset in the first round and keep their championship hopes alive. The Heatles is also going to benefit from their opponent's player having an injury, as John Frank has Peyton Pritchard, who will have more opportunities with the injury to Jaylen Brown and him sitting out tonight's game. On the other side of the bracket, we have the Infirmary going up against Malik's Monastery in the 4-5 matchup. As we look at Ryan W. in the Infirmary, unfortunately, his team name is showing some teeth as we near the playoffs. He acquired Stephen Curry this year in a trade. However, Curry is going to continue to miss time with a knee injury that has kept him out since January 30th. It's unlikely that Curry is going to suit up for this first round matchup, as it was reported by Anthony Slater yesterday that he's going to miss the next 10 days with his knee injury. Curry has yet to begin any on-court practice work, so it's unlikely he'll make a surprise return anytime in the week. In that absence, Ryan is going to need some big contributions from players like Brandon Miller, Amen Thompson, Jalen Johnson, and OG Anunoby. These stars are going to need to fill the gaps that have been left with Steph Curry's absence. The Infirmary is going to have some slight injury luck, though, as Trey Murphy III came back and played last night for the Pelicans. He had a nice output, scoring 16 points and having 2 rebounds and 3 assists. If Murphy can get his feet back under him and get up to speed in the offense coming off of his injury, he can fill the gaps left by Curry's injury and 3-pointers and points made. On the other side of this matchup, Malik's Monastery has been plagued by injuries throughout the season and still has a couple of injuries that he'll need to navigate in this first round matchup. Pascal Siakam has been out since February 24th and continues to be out as the playoffs begin. There is a chance that Siakam could return. However, there's been no indications on if he'll be able to show up for this first round matchup. Thomas also will need to navigate injuries to Andrew Nembhard and Zion Williamson, who both missed games last night with some injuries. Neither player is listed as injured and are only listed as a game time decision for their upcoming matchups. With these injuries to a couple of these contributing players, it's imperative that Thomas gets big outputs from his star players, Nikola Jokic, Kevin Durant, and Kawhi Leonard. Durant in particular ranks first in Yahoo's player rankings over the last 2 weeks, and Jokic ranks 8th. The 2 former MVPs, as well as Kawhi Leonard, are going to need to continue to show out the way they have so far this season for Thomas to make the upset from the 5 seed and continue to make a run in the playoffs moving forward. It's been quite the season so far in the association, and now that the playoffs here, there's so much more to watch and so much that can happen. We've seen over our league that upsets can happen from any of the lower seeds in the championship bracket, so while you might be a top seed, nothing is guaranteed. We'll be sure to have some deep analysis once the playoff matchups for the quarterfinals are over, and we'll be able to highlight the semifinal matchups and whose teams are having an advantage in those matchups. Thanks to everyone for listening in to this episode of the Association Pod. The playoff times are very exciting, and it's so good to see that all teams have something to play for, with the consolation champion having the best odds in the lottery, and of course, the championship not only having bragging rights, but also our league prize at the end of the season. Until next time, I'm your host, Aaron, manager of the Jimmy Chitwoods. Everyone have a great week, and God bless.